Hey there, sleepyheads. Welcome back to the channel. Before we drift into tonight's tale of Orgalorg and the space entities, I'd love to know where in the world are you watching from tonight? And what time is it for you right now? Drop it in the comments below. It's always magical, seeing how far and wide this sleepy little community reaches. All right, lights low, blankets up, let's begin. Far beyond the lands of Oo, beyond the reach of the Candy Kingdom and the Ice Kingdom, beyond even the comets that streak across the night sky, there are old stories whispered among the stars themselves. These stories tell of beings so ancient and so powerful that even the bravest mortals would tremble to hear their names. And among these figures, one stands apart as both terrifying and strangely tragic. This being was called Orgalorg. Long before anyone in Oo would know the name, Orgalorg was not the waddling, feathered little creature we see by the Ice King's side. He was not clumsy or comical. No, he was a force of destruction, a cosmic terror that traveled the dark sea of space, feared by worlds and remembered by the universe as something like a living storm. Orgalorg was ancient, older than most of the civilizations that dotted the stars. Where he came from, no one truly knows. Some say he was born from the black silence between galaxies, a child of hunger and shadow. Others suggest he was once a shard of something even greater, perhaps a splinter from the chaos embodied by Golb, separated yet still carrying the endless appetite of that terrible force. Whatever his true origin, Orgalorg was a predator of worlds. He sought power not in the simple conquest of armies or the ruling of empires, but in the devouring of energy itself. Imagine for a moment the night sky endless and still, and then picture something vast moving through it. Something that blots out stars as it drifts closer. Orgalorg was not bound by the same physical forms that mortals know. His body, if it could be called that, was vast and shifting, like a nightmare given shape. Some saw him as a massive black silhouette, with many wings, others as a crawling thing with eyes that burned like dying suns. But no matter the vision, one truth remained. When Orgalorg arrived, destruction followed. Entire planets feared his coming. Civilizations built myths around him, warning their children never to look too long into the night sky for fear that Orgalorg's gaze might fall upon them. Where he appeared, stars grew dim. Where he lingered, the balance of creation itself seemed to tilt. And yet for all his destructive power, he was not simply a beast. He was cunning. He planned. He knew of things beyond the reach of ordinary minds. What Orgalorg sought most of all was the Catalyst Comet. This was no ordinary comet, but a recurring cosmic event that carried within it the seeds of rebirth, destruction, and destiny. The comet appeared once in an age, and when it came, it could grant unimaginable power to the one who grasped it. For Orgalorg, the comet was more than just a meal. It was his chance to rise beyond even the title of a terror. It was his chance to become a god among the entities of the stars. The comet, however, was not unguarded. The multiverse itself seemed to weave protections around it, subtle forces that guided it to the right hands at the right time. Heroes, villains, and cosmic judges alike all played roles in its cycle, and Orgalorg, in his hunger, disrupted that balance. He sought to seize the comet by force, ignoring the delicate rhythm of fate. This act of ambition did not go unnoticed. Across the fabric of reality, other cosmic beings stirred. Some, like the mysterious time room entities, observed in silence. The cosmic owl, messenger of destiny, carried visions of Orgalorg's schemes to dreamers across galaxies. And perhaps even Golb, chaotic and unknowable, took notice of this lesser shadow striving to devour the comet's power. But Orgalorg did not care. His hunger was endless, and his pride greater still. He began his march toward the comet, his form unfurling through the void, wings spreading wide, his voice shaking the silence between the stars. The universe, however, was not willing to let him succeed so easily. For though Orgalorg was mighty, he was not the only force moving in that age. The stars themselves seemed to whisper of a coming trial, a reckoning that would see the great terror cast down from the heavens. What could humble a creature so vast? What could bring low something that fed on the energy of worlds? The answer would come soon enough, though in ways Orgalorg could never have predicted. He believed himself untouchable, eternal, a predator above all others. And yet, as all things in the universe must eventually learn, no force is beyond balance. The legends say that when Orgalorg moved, the firmament itself quaked. He was not like the Lich born from the decay of life. He was not like Golb, who existed as a principle of entropy, dissolving form into chaos. Orgalorg was hunger given shape, a craving that extended beyond the boundaries of galaxies. He did not wish to corrupt or to annihilate. He wished to consume. His strength grew with each world he devoured, and with each new cycle of the stars his ambition swelled like a tide. Some cultures painted him in murals upon their cavern walls, depicting a bird-shaped shadow blotting out suns. Others spoke of him as a dragon whose wings could cover the firmament, and some, who had faced him directly, dared to record no image at all, for even remembering him brought terror into their dreams. He was not a story for children in those times. He was an inevitability. It is said that Orgalorg's power came not merely from his own being, but from his ability to bend the essence of matter and energy to his will. Planets whose cores burned with molten fire found themselves cooled into lifeless husks after his passing. Stars that should have shone for billions of years dimmed centuries too soon. His appetite was both physical and metaphysical. He fed upon the spark of existence itself, the very rhythm that kept the cosmos alive. But such a being cannot exist unnoticed. The multiverse, though vast, has its guardians and its judges. Among them were entities who watched over the balance of creation, beings who had no mortal names, only titles. Some watched from the edges of time, some from the heart of dreams, and others from the thresholds of death itself. Orgalorg's ambition, and especially his fixation on the Catalyst Comet, was a disruption too great to ignore. The comet was a promise. It did not belong to Orgalorg, nor to any single being who craved its light. It was a cycle meant to carry change and destiny where it was needed most. And when Orgalorg reached for it, he threatened to unravel that cycle entirely. His claws, if they had closed around the comet, might have ended the delicate thread of fates that stretched across infinite worlds. And so the cosmic court was stirred. Imagine for a moment a gathering of incomprehensible beings, their forms towering, shifting, glowing with the very fabric of reality. Some took the shape of titanic animals, others glimmered like geometric prisms, and others had no form at all, only voices that rang like crystal chimes. They convened in a realm beyond space, a place where stars were pinpricks beneath their feet, and time folded like a soft ribbon. Here they spoke of Orgalorg and of what must be done. Not all agreed. Some feared that striking down a being so vast would only create ripples of destruction. Others argued that Orgalorg was a necessary shadow, a counterweight to the forces of creation. But the voices of warning were drowned out by the urgency of the comet's imminent arrival. Orgalorg could not be allowed to seize it. If he succeeded, the balance would tilt so far into hunger that the multiverse itself might collapse inward, devoured until nothing remained. So the court reached a decision. Orgalorg would be stripped of his grandeur. His wings would be folded, his power shattered, and his essence bound to the small, fragile form of a creature from a distant world. A penguin. Harmless, overlooked, destined never to be taken seriously. It was not mere punishment. It was humiliation, a reminder to the once terrifying being that even the greatest predator could be reduced to nothing more than a servant or a pet. But before this punishment was carried out, Orgalorg raged. His voice thundered across galaxies, shaking the dreams of mortals light years away. He swore he would rise again, that no prison could contain his will. He vowed that the comet's light would one day be his, even if it meant waiting countless lifetimes. His cries echoed into the void, carried on solar winds, carved into the memories of those who trembled beneath his shadow. And yet, when the judgment was given, even Orgalorg could not resist the combined will of the cosmos. His wings crumbled, his many eyes closed, his vast form began to shrink. What had once stretched across the void collapsed inward, spiraling tighter and tighter until it could fit within the soft, round body of a bird. And so, with a final flash of cosmic power, the terror of the stars was cast down, hurled across the universe, falling toward the small blue planet that we know as Earth. The fall of Orgalorg through the void was unlike the descent of any ordinary creature. Imagine a blazing comet streaking across the heavens, only this was not a body of ice and rock. This was the remains of a cosmic terror, stripped of its power, tumbling helplessly through star fields it once darkened with its shadow. He tumbled silently past constellations, past the cold dust of dead suns, past places where he had once reigned in fear. Now, powerless, he was carried like a leaf on a river of fate. When he struck Earth, it was not with the force of a meteor shattering continents, but with the soft thud of something small, fragile, and almost laughably weak. Where once he had been a nightmare, now he was a penguin. Round, feathery, awkward. His wings, once spread wide enough to block entire moons, were reduced to flippers that could only flap clumsily. His voice, once a roar that carried across galaxies, became nothing more than a squeak. To those who found him, he was not a god, not a monster, not even a threat. He was Gunther. There is a cruel poetry in that transformation. For the universe did not simply destroy Orgalorg. It diminished him. It forced him to experience existence as something he had once dismissed, something so far beneath him that he would never have imagined it possible. In his tiny body, his vast mind remained, coiled and waiting, full of bitter hunger. Yet he could no longer command the storms of space. He could no longer swallow stars or crush the will of empires. He was trapped in a body too weak to even pour tea without spilling it. And yet this was not the end of Orgalorg. In some ways, it was only the beginning of a new chapter in his strange fate. For though his cosmic form had been sealed away, fragments of his power lingered. Shadows of memory stirred within him, surfacing at odd times. A glance at the night sky might awaken a flash of remembrance, visions of his wings spread across the void, or the feel of a comet's glow almost within reach. These fragments twisted his new existence, guiding his actions in ways that appeared random to others but were, in truth, whispers of his true self. Those who lived near him would never suspect the depths hidden behind his blank stare. To the Ice King, he was just another penguin, mischievous and strangely loyal. To visitors of the Ice Kingdom, he was nothing more than a pet waddling about the halls, sometimes causing trouble, sometimes following orders. But every so often, in the quiet of the frozen night, Gunther would gaze at the stars with a strange intensity, as though remembering something older than memory itself. This duality, the cosmic predator wrapped in a penguin skin, became a kind of haunting riddle. Could Orgalorg ever truly be contained? Was his essence truly diminished, or was it only sleeping, biding its time until the cycle turned once more? The cosmic court had cast him down, but even they could not erase him entirely. There are some forces in the multiverse that are too deeply woven into existence to be undone. They can only be redirected, reshaped, or delayed. And so Orgalorg waited. He played his role as Gunther, the small companion to a lonely king. But inside his mind swirled with ancient hungers. He remembered the catalyst comet. He remembered the way it had burned, the way it had resisted his grasp, the way it had been carried safely away before his claws could close around it. And he remembered the voices of those who had judged him, those who had called him a threat too great to be allowed freedom. This memory did not fade. If anything, it grew sharper with time, like a stone rolling endlessly in a river until it becomes smooth and defined. Orgalorg, in his tiny form, began to dream once again of rising. Though he no longer had wings to blot out the stars, though he no longer had a voice to shake the heavens, his desire remained untouched. And desire is one of the most enduring forces in the universe. The tragedy of Orgalorg lies here, in this tension between form and essence. Outwardly he was harmless, yet inwardly he still carried the ambitions of a god. The other cosmic entities may have believed that by casting him into such a lowly shape, they had ended his reign forever. But in truth, they had only planted him into the soil of destiny, waiting for the day when he might attempt to sprout again. And if you've ever wondered why Gunther sometimes seemed to act with more will than a simple penguin should, why he sometimes reached toward power with a gleam in his eye, it is because that ancient hunger was never gone. It was only sleeping. Even in his diminished state, Orgalorg remained a being tied to the great rhythm of the universe. And the universe has a way of circling back upon itself. The comet that had once eluded him was destined to return, and when it did, Orgalorg's old hunger stirred awake like embers catching flame once more. The cosmos had hoped that by casting him down, they had erased the threat. But some threats are not erased by punishment. They are only made patient. As the ages passed, Orgalorg's legend slipped from the stars and into silence. Civilizations that once feared his shadow collapsed into dust. New worlds rose in their place, never knowing that above them once drifted a terror that blotted out suns. Only a handful of cosmic entities, timeless and ever watchful, remembered. For them, Orgalorg was not gone, only reduced, waiting for his chance. Meanwhile, on Earth, life continued as it always does, flowing onward without ever realizing the secrets that walk beside it. Few in the land of Oo would have guessed that the waddling penguin, under the Ice King's command, carried within him the echoes of a galactic predator. Gunther's antics, from stealing objects to clinging obsessively to the Ice King's crown, were often dismissed as the quirks of a simple pet. But those quirks sometimes betrayed the truth. There was a strange gravity to him, an odd sharpness behind his blank gaze, as though he saw more than his body would allow him to express. In quiet moments, Orgalorg stirred. The pull of the stars above never truly left him. Even within his diminished form, he could feel the thrum of the universe, faint but steady, like a heartbeat just beyond hearing. And always beneath that rhythm was the memory of the comet, the one thing he could never forget. It was not only power he had sought, but destiny itself. The comet had a way of intertwining with the fates of great heroes and villains, shaping the course of entire worlds. To seize it was to seize the very thread of destiny, and Orgalorg's desire for it had never cooled. What he did not know, or perhaps what he refused to admit, was that his fall had not only diminished his form, it had altered his place in the great balance. The comet had eluded him for a reason. Destiny had chosen another, and in the choice of that other, Orgalorg's role was fixed. He was not to be the devourer of the comet, but its challenger, its shadow. For every force of creation must have a force that resists it. Orgalorg became that resistance, even as a penguin in the icy halls of a lonely king. Still, Orgalorg waited. Patience is a strange thing when stretched across eon. For mortals, it means minutes or years. For entities like Orgalorg, patience can mean the silence of centuries. He waited through the Ice King's madness, through the rise of kingdoms, through the reshaping of the world after the war. He waited while heroes and villains played out their stories, all the while keeping his gaze on the sky. And then at last, the cycle began to turn. The catalyst comet returned. Its glow could be seen streaking across the night heavens of a brilliant reminder that destiny was moving once again. To mortals, it was a wonder. To Orgalorg, it was a call. Deep within his small body, the hunger that had once stretched across galaxies flared alive. It was as though his essence had been waiting only for this, and now the ember became a flame. The transformation began slowly, almost imperceptibly. Gunther became restless, pacing, watching the comet's path with unsettling focus. His eyes, once comically blank, carried a sharpness that startled those who looked too long. He began to recall not just fragments, but entire waves of memory, the wings he once spread across the stars, the cries of planets as he descended upon them, the overwhelming surge of hunger that once defined him. He was not just Gunther anymore. He was remembering Orgalorg. The universe shuddered quietly as this awakening unfolded. The court of cosmic beings, these who had cast him down, stirred in their realms of timeless light. They knew what it meant for Orgalorg to rise again. Yet they also knew that destiny is not so easily rewritten. The comet was destined for another. Orgalorg's role was fixed. Whether he understood it or not, still they watched, for the shadow of hunger cannot be ignored. And so, as the comet's glow bathed the night skies of Orgalorg prepared to reclaim what he believed was his. He longed to devour its light, to break free of the feathered body that had mocked him for centuries, to once again stand among the great terrors of the universe. In his mind, he could already feel his wings unfurling, his eyes blazing, his roar echoing through the stars. But the truth is, even then, Orgalorg was walking into the same fate that had always awaited him. The comet was never his to claim. He was never destined to rise above the cosmos, no matter how fiercely his hunger burned. The tragedy of Orgalorg is not only that he fell, but that he could never see that he was meant to fall. He could never accept that his role in the story of the universe was not as the devourer of destiny, but as the reminder of how fragile ambition can be. And so, as the comet drew near, and Orgalorg's old power stirred within him once more, the stage was set for the next chapter of his strange and sorrowful tale. The stars, which had once trembled at his wings, now waited quietly to see how the fallen terror of the cosmos would face his destiny once again. When we think of judgment, we often imagine a mortal courtroom. A wooden bench, a gavel striking, voices raised in argument. But the judgment of a cosmic entity like Orgalorg was nothing like that. His trial unfolded in a realm far beyond the sight of mortals, a place where time did not flow in lines, but in vast spirals, and where the very fabric of space shimmered like a living tapestry. The gathering was not of kings or queens, but of forces that shaped the stars themselves. They were not bound by flesh, not confined to simple shapes. Some appeared as radiant spheres of light, brighter than any sun. Others drifted in crystalline forms, faceted like jewels that refracted whole galaxies within them. Some had no form at all, existing only as voices that trembled through the void. These were the ones who would decide the fate of Orgalorg. He was brought before them not in chains, but in the sheer weight of their combined will. No prison could hold him. But the unified gaze of these entities was prison enough. Each one carried within it the power to shape the destiny of worlds, and together they were irresistible. Orgalorg, for all his fury, stood before them unbowed. Even stripped of much of his strength, his eyes still burned with the hunger of ages. He spoke not in words as mortals would hear them, but in waves of thought that crashed like thunder. He argued that he was the natural heir to the comet's light, that his hunger was not a flaw, but a necessary truth of the universe. He claimed that by consuming, he preserved balance, just as night must balance day. But the court was not swayed. They saw in him not balance, but greed unending. They saw not a guardian of cosmic cycles, but a predator who would swallow the very rhythm of destiny if given the chance. One by one, their voices rose against him. Some spoke of the planets he had drained, worlds that now drifted lifeless and dark. Others spoke of the comet and how its purpose was not to empower a single being, but to spark renewal across ages. Still, not all were in agreement. Among the gathered were those who hesitated, who saw Orgalorg as a necessary darkness. One voice, deep and slow as the turning of a planet, rumbled that hunger was as much a part of the universe as creation. Another, sharp and crystalline, suggested that to erase Orgalorg entirely would unravel threads of fate far beyond their sight. Perhaps he was meant to be, they argued, a shadow that destiny needed. Yet these voices were drowned by the tide of those who had seen too much destruction. The comet's cycle was too important to risk. Orgalorg's appetite was too vast, his ambition too dangerous. And so, in a decision that echoed across galaxies, the court pronounced their sentence. They would not destroy him. To destroy an entity so ancient was to risk shattering parts of reality itself. Instead, they would diminish him. His cosmic body would be broken down, his essence folded into something small, harmless, and bound to a single world far from the stars he once devoured. In this way, he would not be erased, but humbled. He would know weakness. He would live not as a predator of worlds, but as something comical, overlooked, and ignored. The sentence rippled through the void like a great bell ringing. Orgalorg's fury shook the stars. He roared against them, declaring that their judgment was nothing but fear disguised as order. He swore that he would return, that the comet would be his, that no prison could truly contain him. His defiance was terrible to hear, and even the timeless entities who passed judgment felt the weight of his words. But the decision was final. The court moved as one, and the unraveling began. Orgalorg's wings, once vast enough to blot out constellations, began to fold inward. His many eyes, burning like suns, closed one by one. His immense form shrank, collapsing upon itself, drawn tighter and tighter, until it no longer resembled the terror that had consumed planets. Where once a cosmic predator had stood, there was now only the fragile shell of something small. A form chosen not at random, but with careful intention. A penguin, harmless and comical, stripped of all grandeur. A being no one would ever mistake for a devourer of stars. And so, with his essence bound and his body diminished, Orgalorg was hurled downward through the tapestry of space, falling toward Earth. The court watched in silence as he tumbled away, their judgment carried out. They had hoped they had ended the threat. What they did not know was that hunger cannot be destroyed. It can only be made to wait. And so the story of the Cosmic Court begins to take shape. Imagine, for a moment, a chamber that is not built with stone or wood, but instead carved out of raw reality itself. The court was not a place that existed in one particular corner of the universe. It was said to exist everywhere and nowhere, a fold of existence stitched together for the sole purpose of judgment. There, the great entities of space gathered, their forms incomprehensible to mortal eyes, each embodying a truth of the cosmos. Prismo, the Wish-Master, shimmering like a golden cube that hummed with timeless laughter. The King of Mars, regal and weary, carrying the burden of leadership across millennia. The Cosmic Owl, silent and watchful, drifting between dream and destiny. Even the silent presences of stranger beings, ones never named, who might have been siblings to Golb, or perhaps the remnants of stars that had achieved thought. All were there, not because they desired conflict, but because Orgalorg had forced their hand. For too long, his hunger had threatened to unbalance the fragile harmony of existence. Orgalorg had devoured star-born creatures, drained nebulas of their essence, and schemed to bring the comet the mysterious, recurring harbinger of great change under his sway. The comet was more than a celestial body. It was destiny incarnate, and to consume it would have made Orgalorg something even greater, something no longer tethered to the rules of existence. But the Cosmic Court could not allow that. Even Prismo, who often delighted in bending rules, was said to have looked upon Orgalorg with a kind of sadness, knowing that some ambitions were simply too dangerous. The trial itself was less about arguments and more about revelation. The Cosmic Court did not debate in words as mortals understand them. Instead, they revealed truths, laying bare the essence of Orgalorg's actions. Imagine standing in a place where your entire past, every decision, every craving and hunger, is projected not as a story, but as a raw stream of cosmic truth for all to see. Orgalorg's gluttony, his insatiable hunger, pulsed in the chamber like a sickness. And yet Orgalorg did not shrink. He boomed with laughter, his form shifting between wings, tentacles, and eyes that burned like black suns. He claimed the cosmos belonged to him, that he was not a criminal, but a rightful ruler, born from the void to dominate the stars. He mocked the court, daring them to strike him down. There is something strangely tragic about that. Orgalorg was not a creature of subtlety. His desires were straightforward: power, dominion, and the endless feast of the universe itself. But in his bluntness he exposed how deeply he misunderstood the balance that held the cosmos together. To him, existence was prey. To the court, existence was a fragile harmony that required guardianship. The Cosmic Owl was the one to deliver a vision, a dream carried into the chamber, in which Orgalorg was shown what his reign would bring. Stars consumed, civilizations crumbling, a silence so vast it would echo forever. The dream was not to persuade him, but to lay the truth bare. And still Orgalorg laughed. And so the verdict was unanimous. The entities of the court, from the bright glow of Prismo to the austere stillness of the Martian king, agreed that Orgalorg could no longer be allowed to roam free. But here lay a challenge. Orgalorg could not simply be destroyed. His essence was woven too deeply into the fabric of creation. To unmake him might tear holes in the very cosmos they were sworn to protect. Instead, the court turned to an older form of punishment, banishment, and transformation, to strip a being of their true nature, to reduce them into something smaller, contained, humbled. It was not death, but it was a kind of living imprisonment, one that might serve as both punishment and protection for the rest of existence. The judgment shook Orgalorg to his core, for it was not merely a cage they sought to build around him. They planned to unravel him, to reduce him to something lesser. And for all his bluster and hunger, even Orgalorg knew what it meant to be diminished, to have his wings clipped and his might torn away. The chamber grew heavy as the sentence was declared. Orgalorg would no longer be the terror of the stars. He would be reshaped, forced to live a mortal existence, far from the power and glory of the cosmos he once claimed. The air of that cosmic chamber was said to be filled not with oxygen or warmth, but with pure silence. Imagine, if you will, a stillness so deep that even thought itself seemed muffled, as if the fabric of reality had been stretched taut. This was the stage upon which Orgalorg was summoned. Not as a guest, not even as an equal, but as an accused. The ancient entities of the multiverse did not assemble often. When they did, it meant that a force had threatened more than a single world. It meant that the very balance of existence was in peril. At the center of the court, Orgalorg did not cower. No, the entity stood, or rather hovered, with a presence as immense as a black hole's pull. His form was described in myths as shifting, hard to pin down. Some stories tell of a being with wings that stretched further than the horizon, others of a shadow that rippled like liquid across the void. Whatever the true form, all accounts agree on one thing. He radiated hunger, a ceaseless need to devour and dominate, as if the stars themselves were morsels waiting to be swallowed. And so the court chose another path. They resolved to strip Orgalorg of his cosmic form, not to end him, but to diminish him. His essence, vast and terrible, would be compressed, bound, and confined into a body so frail, so powerless, that he would never again threaten the stars. It was a punishment of irony, of humiliation, to take the great devourer of worlds and cast him into the body of something small, something easily overlooked, a vessel of feather and beak, a penguin. But before the sentence was carried out, Orgalorg spoke. His voice, it said, was like a storm carried on the back of eternity. It thundered without sound, seared without flame. He promised that the court's decision would not end him, that he would return, that even reduced to ash or bone, his will would find a way to claw back to power. Some accounts whispered that he named the entities individually, calling out their hidden fears, mocking their supposed wisdom. To the creature of time he laughed, declaring that even eternity frays. To the spiral of gravity, he mocked its endless hunger to collapse. And to the being of possibility, he warned that probabilities could always be rewritten. It was in that final defiance that the tribunal acted. A sphere of energy was conjured, woven from countless laws of the cosmos itself. They did not strike him with blades or chains, but with inevitability. It wrapped around Orgalorg's body, folding and folding until his towering presence shrank, until his wings and shadows in endless hunger compressed into something feathered, clumsy, and absurd. And just like that, the terror of the stars became Gunther. But the sentencing was not only about his body. The court reached deeper, inscribing seals into his very soul. They dampened his memory, dulled his awareness, smothered his hunger beneath layers of instinct. He would not remember the tribunal. He would not remember the endless skies. All he would know was the cold, the fish, the silly waddle of penguin life. Or so the tribunal believed. Yet the universe is never so simple. For deep inside the penguin's body, beneath the playful exterior, Orgalorg remained, not erased, but sleeping. His power was a flame smothered beneath ashes, waiting for the right wind to stir it awake. His memories were not destroyed, but hidden, as if behind a veil. And like all veils, there was always the risk that, given time, they might lift. And here lies one of the most unsettling truths. Cosmic entities may pass judgment, but they are not omnipotent. Their laws, though vast, are not perfect. They act with fear, with caution, with compromise. And in doing so, they leave cracks. Orgalorg was not unmade. He was only hidden, cast down from terror to comedy, from predator to pet. But destiny, as the tribunal surely knew, has a way of circling back. And so the judgment was made. Orgalorg, the once proud terror of the stars, would not be destroyed, for destruction could scatter his essence into forms far worse than his current one. The cosmic court knew that beings like Orgalorg could not simply be ended. Their existence was too deeply woven into the threads of reality. Instead, he would be contained, not by chains, not by prisons built of matter or energy, but by transformation itself. His power would be folded in on itself, his vast form crushed into something fragile, something harmless, something so far removed from his true identity that the universe would no longer tremble at the sound of his name. It is here that we see the great irony of Orgalorg's story. A creature who once swallowed galaxies, who ruled across starfields, would be reshaped into a small waddling bird, a penguin. A creature overlooked, underestimated, and dismissed as silly and harmless. The court's judgment was not only a punishment, but also a lesson. They decided that for all eternity, Orgalorg would walk among others as a being ignored, powerless, and forgotten, unable to inspire the awe and fear he once commanded. As the transformation took hold, Orgalorg screamed. His cry was not the roar of cosmic thunder he was known for, but a weak, squawking sound as his body twisted into its new form. The stars themselves seemed to shudder, as if the universe was holding its breath, and then it was done. Where once stood the embodiment of fear and ambition, now waddled a small, clumsy penguin. His claws had become little flippers, his wings bound tightly to his side, his great, terrible gaze shrunk into round, glassy eyes. The court did not stop there. They cast him down, hurling his new body through the layers of space until he fell upon Earth. Not the mighty Earth of humanity's golden age, but the Earth that was scarred and broken after the Great Mushroom War. He was sent not to the throne rooms of kings or the towers of sorcerers, but into the wilderness, to live among creatures who would never know what he once was. His exile was complete, and yet within this punishment there was a lingering danger. Orgalorg's essence was not fully gone. The cosmic entities knew that such a being could not be stripped entirely of what he was. The penguin body was only a shell, a disguise, a cage. Deep within it, like a coal hidden in ashes, the spark of Orgalorg still burned, quiet, diminished, smothered by feathers and instinct, but waiting. And that waiting was perhaps the most terrifying part of his punishment. For if ever the right conditions arose, if ever the shell were cracked, Orgalorg's true self might stir again. Some whisper that Golb himself watched the banishment with a kind of silent amusement. Golb, the Chaos Bringer, does not often intervene directly, yet there are those who believe he saw potential in Orgalorg's exile. A predator stripped of its power is not truly gone, it is simply biding its time. And Golb, who feeds on ruin, may have known that one day the forgotten penguin would stumble into destiny once more. For now, though, Orgalorg was alone. He found himself wandering the icy landscapes, his body adapted to cold, his new instincts guiding him to huddle with others of his kind. But he was not like the others. Where they were content, he was restless. Where they were peaceful, he was unsettled. The hunger for power never left him, though his flippers could not grasp it, and his voice could no longer command it. He was trapped, forced to live in silence, in absurdity, in the shadow of who he once was. The universe moved on. The stars turned. The cosmic court forgot him, or at least pretended to. But in the far reaches of existence, whispers of the trial remained. Stories of the day when the court gathered to cast out one of their own, and always in those stories there was a reminder. Orgalorg was not destroyed. Orgalorg was still here. And that is where the banishment leaves us. A once mighty force reduced to feathers and wattles, cast aside by the highest powers in the universe. But if there is one truth about beings like Orgalorg, it is that they do not simply fade away. They linger. They plot. They wait for their chance to rise again. As we close this chapter, picture him alone in the frozen wastes of Earth, his small form shuffling against the wind, his eyes glinting faintly with something deeper than instinct. Beneath that feathery disguise, the forgotten terror of the stars was still dreaming, still aching for the day he would reclaim what was lost. And that, perhaps, was what made his punishment both just and dangerous. For sometimes, what is buried too deeply can one day break free. Let us keep drifting through the strange saga of Orgalorg. We've already wandered through the echoes of the cosmic court, that place where stars judge stars and where Orgalorg's ambitions finally caught up to him. But tonight, in this part of our tale, we turn toward the transformation, the reshaping of this galactic terror into something almost laughably small. A penguin, a waddling, squeaky, seemingly harmless creature. And yet within that little body, something ancient and dangerous continued to stir. Imagine it for a moment, lying back in the quiet of your room. Orgalorg, this vast, sprawling presence, a creature who once stretched across the void like a shadow made of hunger and malice, suddenly being wrapped up, squeezed down, and pressed into the fragile shape of a tiny being. It wasn't just punishment, it was humiliation. To be reduced so far beneath his former self was a statement. It was the cosmic court declaring that Orgalorg was no longer worthy of standing among the entities of the stars. Instead, he would be sent down to Earth, stripped of nearly everything, barely more than a whisper of what he had been. This transformation wasn't instant, though. It wasn't as if he blinked and was suddenly a penguin. The process of becoming Gunther was something almost ritualistic, filled with layers of stripping away. His powers, one by one, fell from him. The ability to command great cosmic forces dissolved into emptiness. His memory, once sharp enough to recall every world he had conquered and every star that trembled at his presence, became clouded, fragmented, like a dream slipping away the moment you wake. Even his form resisted the change, thrashing and stretching, until finally the decree of the court overwhelmed his will. What emerged was small, feathery, soft, and almost comical. And yet deep down, Orgalorg was still there. The penguin mask did not erase him entirely. It only buried him under layers of limitation, distraction, and fragility. This is what makes Gunther such a fascinating figure in the story of Ooh. To those around him, Gunther seemed harmless, even ridiculous at times. But for those who knew to look deeper, there was always something a little uncanny about him, a little too intense in the eyes, a little too forceful in the way he clung to objects of power, especially crowns and strange artifacts, almost as though something buried in his soul remembered a time when he had commanded galaxies instead of ice cubes. When Orgalorg first became Gunther, he was cast down to Earth, where life was already shifting and reshaping itself. The world that would one day become Ooh was in flux, the traces of the Mushroom War not yet carved across its surface. In this time, Gunther waddled among the creatures of Earth unnoticed, blending into the rhythm of life. The cosmic court had ensured he would not be easily found. His presence was muted, his aura sealed, so that not even the other entities drifting through space would immediately recognize him. But here is where the story takes a strangely poetic turn. Orgalorg, the devourer, the destroyer of worlds, became the companion of one of the most peculiar beings Earth would ever produce, the Ice King. At first glance, their relationship might seem random, even comedic, but in truth, it feels almost fated. Gunther, with his obsession for crowns, drew toward the enchanted crown that Simon Petrikov wore. That crown, in turn, was no ordinary trinket. It was itself an object of immense magical power, capable of reshaping the soul of anyone who wore it. The two were bound together, perhaps by chance, perhaps by something greater weaving its way through destiny. To the Ice King, Gunther was just his pet, the one constant in his otherwise fractured and lonely existence. But what if, deep down, Gunther was not just there by chance? What if some sliver of Orgalorg's ancient memory pulled him toward the crown, sensing in it a fragment of the power he once wielded among the stars? This question lingers, whispering through the layers of Adventure Time lore, and it makes us wonder whether Gunther's bond with the Ice King was truly one of loyalty, or simply a patient waiting game for the moment when Orgalorg might rise again. For now, though, let us stay with the transformation itself. Think of how surreal it must have been for this ancient terror to wake up in his new body for the first time, to look at his reflection in a pool of water and see round eyes, stubby wings, and tiny feet, to open his beak and hear not the dreadful roars of the cosmos, but squeaks and squawks, to feel small, fragile, limited. Yet behind those eyes, the echo of Orgalorg remained. A cosmic storm bottled inside a glass jar, a hunger restrained, but never erased. So how does one take a being of such cosmic scale and compressed them into the form of something so small, so seemingly harmless? The answer lies in the strange logic of magic and the will of the entities that passed judgment on him. To the cosmic court, it was not enough to simply scatter Orgalorg into the void or reduce him to dust. That would have been a mercy, an ending, and endings can sometimes be liberating. Instead, they chose something far more enduring, a sentence that would continue for ages without relief. They bound him. They shackled the essence of Orgalorg, not to chains of metal or prisons of stone, but to a form that mocked everything he had once been. No longer would he tower in the black sky like a devouring shadow. Instead, he would waddle. He would squeak. He would flap his stubby wings and stumble across frozen ground, an echo of greatness buried in feathers and fluff. It is here we must remember something profound about transformation in the world of Ooh. Transformation is not only physical, it is spiritual. It bends the mind as much as it does the body. To be forced into the body of a penguin meant more than losing claws and wings that could crush mountains. It meant his voice, once vast enough to echo across nebulae, was reduced to a small, comical honk. His hunger, once stretching across planets, was satisfied with fish and snow cones. His mind, though sharp and scheming, now had to work within the boundaries of his new body's instincts. But here lies the cruel genius of the punishment. For Orgalorg did not forget. The penguin waddled, the penguin stumbled, but somewhere behind those wide eyes a fire still smoldered. He remembered the cold silence of the void. He remembered the judgment. He remembered the sentence. And deep within him, even as he pecked at ice or slid on his belly, he carried an ember of the terror he once was. And this ember created a kind of tension. For to exist as Gunther was, to constantly wrestle with the absurdity of his condition. Every day in that small body reminded him of what he had lost. Imagine a being who once reached for galaxies, now struggling to reach the top of a table. Imagine a predator of the stars forced to be a pet, loyal to an ice king who, despite all his eccentricities, had no idea of the cosmic secret waddling by his side. This was Orgalorg's torment, but also his disguise. For what better cover than to be overlooked, underestimated, and dismissed as harmless? The Ice King adored Gunther, of course. To him, Gunther was a companion, a comfort in his endless loneliness, the little shadow that followed him everywhere. And in some ways, perhaps, Gunther became those things, for transformations, especially ones imposed by magic, often blur the lines of identity. Did Orgalorg truly remain Orgalorg, or was he reshaped in some way by the long years of being Gunther? Did his schemes quiet into dreams, or did the dreams wait patiently, whispering in the corners of his mind? This is one of the haunting mysteries of his story. The punishment was meant to humiliate him, to strip him of grandeur and power. Yet in doing so, it also gave him something he had never experienced before: smallness, vulnerability, a different way of existing in the world. And though he raged against it in silence, one can imagine there may have been moments, fleeting as they were, where even Orgalorg forgot himself and simply lived as Gunther, waddling across ice fields, curling by a fire, being a friend. But of course, the ember of ambition does not extinguish so easily. And within that small body, the ancient terror still waited. It watched, it planned. For though his form had been transformed, and though the cosmic court had declared him banished and reduced, time is long, eternity is longer, and beings like Orgalorg do not surrender their will to dominate so easily. The transformation was not a conclusion. It was the beginning of a long deception, a patient disguise. And as we drift deeper into his tale, we begin to see how this strange, almost comical sentence would one day unravel in unexpected ways, allowing the shadow of Orgalorg to rise once again, no longer hidden, but revealed for all to see. From the very first moment that Orgalorg's essence fused with the penguin's small frame, the contrast between his true self and his new form created a strange dissonance. To those who gazed upon Gunther, all they saw was a waddling, chubby penguin, often making honking noises and flapping his stubby wings in delight or frustration. But beneath the comical surface, Orgalorg's ancient consciousness remained very much awake, simmering quietly like lava beneath a frozen crust. The duality of his existence became the foundation of his long survival. While the other cosmic entities continued to watch over the stars, enforcing balance and shaping worlds, Orgalorg was forced to bide his time in the most unexpected disguise. There is something deeply unsettling about this twist of fate. Here was a creature who had once commanded the destruction of civilizations, reduced to living as the pet of an eccentric ice wizard. It was humiliating, yes, but also strangely strategic. Who would ever suspect that a harmless little penguin might actually house the mind of a fallen space god? As Gunther, Orgalorg began to understand the power of masks. His outward simplicity became a shield. Around the Ice King, he could stomp about, squawk impatiently, or even attack furniture in fits of wild energy, and it was written off as the quirks of a silly animal. No one saw the intelligence behind his eyes. No one suspected the calculations happening deep within. And this, in many ways, gave him more freedom than he had ever known. For the first time, Orgalorg existed beneath notice, free from the endless scrutiny of his cosmic peers. But of course, this disguise was not without its weight. Imagine being a being of infinite hunger and wrath, trapped inside a body too small, too fragile, to truly express what you are. That tension must have gnawed at him daily. When Gunther waddled after the Ice King, carrying fish or sitting quietly by his throne, part of Orgalorg surely raged at the indignity. Yet another part of him may have found something comforting in the simplicity of penguin life. To eat, to nap, to chase after shiny objects, it was an odd balance between suppression and survival. What's even more fascinating is the way Orgalorg's suppressed essence occasionally leaked through. Throughout the series, there are moments where Gunther behaves in ways that suggest far more than animal instinct. For example, his obsession with the Ice King's crown can be seen as more than just the antics of a greedy pet. It may have been Orgalorg's buried desire for power resurfacing, a faint echo of the destruction he once commanded. The crown itself, tied deeply to ancient magic and cosmic chaos, must have called to him in ways few could understand. And then there are the flashes of startling violence. Gunther's temper, his sudden attacks on others, his unpredictable moods. These moments carry the weight of Orgalorg's true nature, pressing against the limits of his tiny vessel. To the Ice King, it was funny or annoying, just another quirk of his pet. To Orgalorg, it may have been an expression of his ancient rage, unable to remain fully hidden even within this cage of feathers and flippers. Still, in all his centuries as Gunther, he remained patient. This patience was perhaps the most dangerous aspect of all. Orgalorg had already endured banishment, humiliation, and transformation. He knew that time, in the cosmic sense, was almost meaningless. A millennium as a penguin was little more than a pause, a deep breath in the span of eternity. So he waited, biding his time in the shadows of the Ice Kingdom, allowing the world to forget what he once was. And yet, something within him stirred whenever the stars above shone particularly bright, or when whispers of the greater cosmic order brushed against the edges of the world. In those quiet nights, one imagines Gunther gazing up at the auroras above the frozen peaks, his round eyes reflecting not innocence, but longing. Longing for the stars he once roamed, longing for the power he once wielded, longing, perhaps, for vengeance against the cosmic court that cast him down. In those moments, the disguise must have felt unbearable. The smallness of his body, the simplicity of his surroundings, the endless antics of the Ice King, it must have been like wearing chains. And yet, paradoxically, those very chains became his protection. No cosmic force came searching for him, no judgment fell upon his waddling figure. For the universe at large, Orgalorg was gone, erased, forgotten. Only the penguin remained. But fate has a strange way of circling back, doesn't it? As centuries turned to millennia and Oo's world reshaped itself from the ruins of the Mushroom War, Orgalorg's presence remained hidden in plain sight. Perhaps this was the greatest irony of all, that, while kings, empires, and even cosmic orders rose and fell, he endured quietly at the side of a mad wizard, like a shadow of a shadow, waiting for the day when the stars themselves would call to him once more. The most unsettling part of Orgalorg's transformation is how it strips him of his memory and identity, reducing him to nothing more than a silly bird obsessed with ice cubes and waddling around after the Ice King. The curse was not just physical, but mental and spiritual. The weight of the cosmic sentence ensured that Orgalorg could never rise again as a galactic force of terror. Instead, he was placed in a body so harmless that no one would ever suspect the truth. But the thing about eternal power is that it never truly disappears. It simply slumbers. The penguin form acted as a prison, yes, but also as a disguise. When we see Gunther following the Ice King around, pecking at the ground or getting into mischief, it feels almost comedic. Yet beneath that, there is a faint shadow of menace. A penguin should not have moments of glaring with such intelligence. A penguin should not, at times, radiate an aura that unsettles even magical beings. But Gunther does, and these cracks are the lingering essence of Orgalorg pushing against his bindings. It's fascinating to note that even while trapped, Orgalorg instinctively gravitates toward power. The Ice King, with his enchanted crown, is not just a quirky wizard in Gunther's eyes. He is a walking conduit of arcane energy. Staying close to him may have been instinctual, a way for the ancient monster within to keep brushing against magic, to taste echoes of its old strength. If you think about it, Gunther's loyalty is almost too intense, bordering on obsession. Was it really affection, or was it the cosmic predator within recognizing an opportunity? Over the centuries, Gunther became an oddity in the land of Oo. While other penguins lived ordinary lives, he carried the weight of Orgalorg's essence, buried deep but never erased. The transformation created a paradox. He was both Gunther, the silly little companion who liked smashing bottles and dressing up, and Orgalorg, the planet-devouring terror that once roared across galaxies. This dual existence shaped a being unlike any other in Adventure Time. On the surface, harmless. Beneath it, infinitely dangerous. One of the most chilling hints of Orgalorg's presence comes in the way Gunther interacts with magical artifacts. Whenever he touches objects of deep power, he doesn't just use them by accident. There is a kind of deliberate intention. It is as though Orgalorg's essence momentarily rises, peeking through the mask of feathers and flippers. The cursed form cannot completely contain the instincts of a cosmic predator. This is why, in later moments of the story, when Gunther seizes the crown and reshapes reality itself, it feels strangely inevitable. It's the sleeping giant waking up, stretching beneath the skin of a penguin. Imagine what it must have felt like for Orgalorg's consciousness, even if fractured. Centuries of waddling, of pecking, of serving as a pet. The once great devourer of worlds reduced to fetching slippers and squawking in the corner. Was there awareness hidden inside, screaming to be remembered? Or was it a dreamlike slumber where flashes of memory bled into nonsense, leaving him only with strange compulsions and desires? The truth is unknowable, but the thought is haunting. To be so great, and then to be so small. And yet perhaps that was the cruel genius of the banishment. The punishment was not just about containing Orgalorg's power. It was about humiliation. To take something that once threatened galaxies and force it to live as something mocked, overlooked, and ordinary. It was the ultimate stripping away of pride. No cosmic prison, no chains of light, no eternal battlefields, just a penguin's body, a place where the monster could neither rise to glory nor fade entirely into nothing. The curse ensured a constant state of denial and frustration, a prison of identity itself. As time went on, this strange duality created opportunities for storytelling that are both comical and terrifying. Gunther smashing a bottle on his head seems like a gag, until you remember that beneath that surface is the mind of Orgalorg, capable of devastating planets. The contrast makes the character endlessly fascinating. It's a reminder that power never truly vanishes. It changes form, it lies dormant. It waits for a moment when the cracks widen and the bindings weaken. The transformation of Orgalorg into Gunther is perhaps one of the most poetic punishments in all of Adventure Time. It ties into themes of identity, memory, and the nature of power. What does it mean when a being is stripped of everything that made them who they were? Are they truly gone? Or do they remain in the shadows, waiting? With Orgalorg, the answer is both. He was gone, but not gone. He was powerless, but not harmless. He was forgotten, but only by those who did not look closely enough. Only this strange limbo created by the cosmic court's sentence made Gunther a living paradox. The creature who should have been erased from history still waddled around in plain sight, underestimated by everyone, even the ones closest to him. But deep down, the story of Orgalorg was not over. The transformation was not an ending, but a pause, a long, uneasy pause that would one day shatter when the stars aligned once more. And that is where the mystery begins to twist. Because while Gunther remained a pet in the Ice King's palace, something in the universe was always waiting. Cosmic forces never truly forget, and ancient terrors never truly vanish. The transformation may have kept Orgalorg quiet for centuries, but it could not erase destiny. The day would come when the penguin mask would falter, and the old terror would rise again. Tonight, we are going to drift into the shadows of Golb and the other mysterious entities that drift across the edges of reality itself. Golb is not evil in the way we think of villains like the Lich. The Lich is destruction with intent, with a clear mission to wipe away all life and leave nothing behind. Golb, instead, is entropy personified. It does not seek to destroy for a reason. It simply is destruction. To stand before Golb is to feel your body and mind unravel, to have the very laws of being dissolve around you. It is pure, incomprehensible wrongness made flesh. This is why, when we compare Orgalorg and Golb, we see two cosmic stories moving in different directions. Orgalorg was cast down and trapped, diminished from terrifying might, into a small and almost comical form. Golb, on the other hand, was never cast down. Golb remains untouched, its form and power still intact across all of time. It is not a player on the cosmic stage, but the stage itself, the inevitable force that swallows all plays, all actors, all worlds. The interesting part is how the people and creatures of Oo interpret Golb. To them, Golb is not just some distant being floating in space. Golb is a god of chaos, a spiritual and religious concept. We see this with the cult of Golb, a strange group of worshippers who embrace his energy. Their faith in Golb is not about creation or guidance. It is about aligning with destruction, about giving themselves to entropy. And isn't it chilling to think that in the world of Oo, some people find comfort not in light or hope, but in the acceptance of inevitable ruin? This connection between mortals and cosmic forces makes us wonder about the hierarchy of entities in Adventure Time. The cosmic entities like Orgalorg, Prismo, the Time Room, and the Elementals exist as powerful players with specific roles. But Golb exists above and beyond roles. If Prismo is about wish-making and order, and if Orgalorg is about domination, Golb is about the end of all things. It is the shadow behind every other entity, the reminder that no matter what rules exist, chaos is always there waiting. We also see echoes of Golb's power through his influence on the Lich. When the Lich reaches his purest and most destructive state, his energy is not separate from Golb's. In fact, his voice, his aura, and even his goals seem to resonate with Golb's influence. The Lich is like a messenger or an echo of Golb in the physical plane, a being that carries out the entropy that Golb represents. And yet there is still mystery. For all the times we see Golb, we never truly understand what he wants, if he even wants anything at all. That is the difference between Golb and every other being. Want, desire, ambition, these are human terms, maybe even cosmic terms, for creatures like Orgalorg. But Golb is a raw concept given form. He does not need desire. He is what everything will eventually return to. As we explore this, it's worth asking, what does it mean for the people of O to live in a world where forces like Golb exist? Imagine being a simple candy person or a small animal in the woods. Somewhere far beyond your sight there is a being whose very presence unravels reality. You might never see Golb. You might never feel his power directly. And yet the knowledge that he is out there adds a weight to existence. Orgalorg's fall from the stars is dramatic, yes, but Golb's looming shadow is more terrifying in its stillness. As Orgalorg sank deeper into the role of Gunther, the world of Oo slowly shifted around him. Kingdoms rose and fell, heroes were born and faded into legend, and through it all, the penguin waddled at the side of a mad king. Yet in that silence of disguise, the shadows of greater forces never left him. The universe has always been shaped by the will of powers so immense that mortals could scarcely name them. And among these, there was one whose presence made even Orgalorg seem small. Golb. Golb is not like other entities. He is not a creature of chaos in the way we think of it, nor a god in the way mortals pray to. He is more like the embodiment of contradiction itself, the stillness of silence and the shriek of destruction at the same time. While Orgalorg once commanded the stars, Golb is something older, stranger, and far less comprehensible. The legends whisper that Golb has no true form, only a shifting mass of mouths and eyes, a living paradox that erases the boundaries between creation and ruin. Orgalorg may have been a terror, but Golb is something else entirely. He is not just a ruler of destruction, he is destruction itself. Where Orgalorg was driven by hunger for power, Golb has no such desire. His very existence bends reality, and it is here that the connection between them becomes chilling. Many fans have wondered whether Orgalorg, in his attempts to dominate the universe, was unknowingly serving as a shadow of Golb's will. Was his hunger for control simply his own, or was it a ripple sent across the cosmos by Golb, nudging a lesser being into playing his part in the larger design? The more we unravel the lore of Adventure Time, the more we see how entities like Orgalorg, the Lich, and even the elementals may all be reflections of this larger, incomprehensible presence. Orgalorg sought domination of planets, bending them under his influence. The Lich longed for the stillness of death, an end to all life. But Golb stands beyond both. He is both end and beginning, both silence and sound, both form and formlessness. His arrival in U marked not just another villain, but the arrival of something that the universe itself could barely contain. Imagine for a moment Orgalorg in the form of Gunther staring at the stars late at night. Perhaps he waddled away from the Ice King's antics, his eyes reflecting the dark sky. Did he feel Golb's shadow even then, a presence looming across space? Did he recognize that he, once so feared, had become only a footnote in a cosmos where Golb reigned as the embodiment of entropy? There is also the curious question of Golb's relationship to the so-called Cosmic Court, the very tribunal that once judged Orgalorg. If they could exile him to Earth and bind him into weakness, why did they not attempt the same with Golb? Perhaps the answer is simple. Golb cannot be bound. He cannot be destroyed or imprisoned because he is not a being in the way the others are. He exists outside of structure, a living contradiction, immune to the rules that define gods and titans. And yet, Golb did not act alone in the multiverse. He was surrounded by strange figures, entities whose motives were just as obscure. Some seem like avatars of his will, others like cosmic caretakers that stand in opposition to his influence. Prismo, for instance, the wishmaster who exists in his time room, might be seen as a balancing force against Golb. Where Golb unravels, Prismo stabilizes, granting order in the form of a single fulfilled wish. These forces together paint the multiverse as a delicate balance, each cosmic presence shaping reality in its own way. For Orgalorg, caught in the middle of this vast stage, the humiliation of being reduced to Gunther takes on new meaning. Once he thought himself the terror of the stars, but as Golb's shadow stretches over the universe, it becomes clear that he was only a fragment of something larger. His tragedy deepens. Not only did he lose his power, but he also realized, perhaps, that he was never truly at the top to begin with. If Orgalorg's story is one of hubris, then Golb's story is one of inevitability. Where Orgalorg sought dominion, Golb embodied entropy itself. Yet in the quiet spaces of cosmic lore, many whisper that the two were never entirely separate. Some accounts suggest that Orgalorg, in his early rise to power, once drew strength from Golb's shadow, perhaps even channeling a fraction of its destructive essence to fuel his own campaigns. This connection would explain why the cosmic court regarded him with such wariness, as if sensing that his ambitions mirrored Golb's appetite for dissolution. The most intriguing part of this relationship lies in the question of intent. Did Golb intentionally empower Orgalorg, planting in him the seeds of chaos so that he might one day weaken the cosmic order? Or was Orgalorg merely a parasite, leeching from the aura of destruction that Golb exuded without the entity's awareness? The truth, like so many things in the universe of Oo, is left obscured in fragments of myth, scattered visions, and the half-remembered testimonies of ancient beings. What is clear, however, is that Orgalorg's very presence in the multiverse seemed to tilt the balance toward ruin, an echo of Golb's own function. Beyond Golb, other entities left their imprint on Orgalorg's journey. The Lich, for example, though not a cosmic being in the same sense, can be seen as a child of Golb's philosophy, an extension of destruction born into flesh. The parallels between the Lich and Orgalorg are hard to ignore. Both represent hunger, both drive toward the collapse of life and order, and both resist any notion of containment. Yet where the Lich is more singular, almost like a disease carried within the body of existence, Orgalorg was once a conqueror with strategy, ambition, and will. Their similarities may hint that both were merely expressions of Golb's influence, taking different shapes in different epochs of the cosmos. Equally fascinating is Orgalorg's implied connection to Prismo, or at least to the forces of time and wish-granting. While there is no direct evidence that Prismo and Orgalorg crossed paths, their spheres of influence intersect in curious ways. Prismo exists as a dream of the cosmic owl, maintaining the stability of timelines, while Orgalorg desired to manipulate the course of fate by ruling over all life. In this sense, Orgalorg's hunger for dominion was a direct challenge to entities like Prismo who embodied balance. Some have speculated that Orgalorg's repeated failures might have been nudged along by unseen interference from the time room, preventing him from ever truly upsetting the cosmic equilibrium. Such interference would have driven Orgalorg into deeper bitterness, as if fate itself were conspiring against him. Another entity worth considering is the Catalyst Comet. Its recurring presence in the cycle of rebirth and destruction can be seen as an almost counterbalance to Golb. The comet chooses champions of destiny, empowering them to shape the flow of existence, whereas Golb unravels it. Could Orgalorg have once sought to intercept the comet, desiring to either absorb its power or prevent its gift from reaching mortal hands? Some interpretations suggest that Orgalorg's banishment came not just from his attempts at dominion, but also from his meddling in this cosmic cycle. To tamper with the comet would be to tamper with the design of renewal itself, an act that even the mightiest entities would not tolerate. But the most haunting possibility is that Orgalorg's true downfall stemmed from his own inability to separate his will from Golb's. If Orgalorg indeed carried even a trace of Golb's essence, then perhaps his desires were never fully his own. Perhaps his hunger for power, his craving for absolute control, were not expressions of independence, but rather echoes of Golb's eternal drive. This theory reframes Orgalorg not as a purely ambitious conqueror, but as a tragic vessel, pulled by the undertow of destruction he could not escape. And so we are left with a chilling image, Orgalorg, once mighty, standing on the edge of the stars, not just defying the cosmos, but embodying the very chaos it most feared. His shadow was not only his own, but an extension of Golb's darkness, and every attempt he made to seize control only brought him closer to the fate he wished to defy. Golb, in many ways, was the very shadow that haunted Orgalorg's ambitions. The bird-formed husk that shuffled around Ice King's lair might have seemed silly to most of Oo, But inside that form lingered a deep knowledge of this connection. For Orgalorg had seen what Golb could do. Entire civilizations erased with a breath, stars bent into chaos, the harmony of creation undone in an instant. To serve Golb was to abandon all sense of identity, to become nothing but a channel for his destructive will. To oppose Golb was to risk dissolution, as though one had never existed at all. And Orgalorg, proud and terrible though he was, had chosen a third path, one somewhere between worship and rebellion. He hung in the orbit of Golb's shadow, a scavenger of cosmic fear. This strange in-between state explains much of Orgalorg's erratic myth. Some legends portray him as Golb's lieutenant, a clawed herald who softened worlds before the great entity consumed them. Other whispers describe him as a thief, one who dared steal power from Golb's dominion, attempting to claim fragments of chaos as his own. It may well be that both stories are true, reflecting different chapters of an ancient rivalry that could never fully be resolved. For even if Orgalorg once knelt, he did not kneel forever. His pride was too great, his hunger too consuming. Like a moth circling a flame, he came close again and again, hoping to bask in Golb's fire without burning to ash. But Golb was not the only entity Orgalorg contended with. Far beyond the multiverse teemed with other presences, some benevolent, others simply indifferent to mortal existence. The cosmic owl, for instance, is a force of destiny, weaving visions into dreams that alter the paths of heroes and tyrants alike. To many, the owl is a neutral agent, neither good nor evil, but always inevitable. To Orgalorg, however, the cosmic owl was an obstacle, a creature whose whispers bound the threads of fate in ways that limited his reach. If Orgalorg sought to dominate, then destiny itself was his jailer. There are even tales of him attempting to trap the owl within a net of dark energy, to silence its guiding hoot and break destiny's chain. Whether these stories are true or allegorical, they reveal the depth of his defiance. Orgalorg did not simply hunger for power. He hungered for freedom from the laws that governed existence itself. Then there was Prismo, the Wishmaster, existing within his time room at the edge of all reality. If Golb was destruction without reason, and the owl was destiny without mercy, Prismo represent choice, the delicate offering of paths not yet walked. In this balance, Orgalorg likely saw another kind of foe. For what could undermine his terrifying inevitability more than a mortal making a wish that reshaped history? Imagine Orgalorg standing before Prismo, feathered wings spread, eyes burning with hunger, demanding a wish, not for riches, not for armies, but for dominion over every possible choice. If such an encounter occurred, Prismo's calm laughter may have been his undoing. Wishes come with the consequences, and Orgalorg's nature was too bound in greed to ever navigate such a bargain safely. Some speculate that it was in fact Prismo's influence that set the chain of events leading to Orgalorg's banishment in motion, though the Time Room's master would never confirm it. And still, beyond these familiar cosmic figures, there were others whose names barely flicker in the margins of Oo's stories, entities older than stars, beings of silence, living equations that drifted between galaxies, keepers of laws even Golb did not break. Orgalorg, restless and furious, is said to have challenged some of these forgotten ones, clawing at their domains with his insatiable need to dominate. He was not merely a villain in the cosmic tale, but a disruptor, one who tested the boundaries that no other dared cross. This, too, may explain the harshness of his punishment. A single act of rebellion could be forgiven. A campaign of defiance against destiny, chaos, and cosmic law could not. What makes Orgalorg so haunting is that even in defeat, even as a penguin trapped under the thrall of Simon Petrikov, his essence still remembers. The shadows of Golb's dominion still echo in his mind. The hoot of the cosmic owl still grates against his memory. The shimmer of Prismo's cube still tempts him. In every waddle and squawk lies a reminder of the vast cosmic chessboard where Orgalorg once played a role, a board where Golb and other entities still move their pieces. Though he is diminished, his hunger is not extinguished. It waits, coiled and patient, in the silly frame of Gunther, biding its time for another chance to rise against those shadows that once eclipsed him. Gunther's story, as strange as it may seem at first, is one of the most tragic and fascinating arcs in Adventure Time. What begins as a simple penguin waddling about in Ice King's castle grows into something so much deeper. To understand the rise and eventual fall of the Gunther identity, we have to step back and look at how this character's seemingly innocent life slowly became a vessel for something much darker. For most of the series, Gunther is portrayed as the comic relief sidekick of Ice King. He is quiet, strange, and often mischievous in ways that seem harmless. At first glance, there appears to be nothing more to him than a funny little companion who waddles across the icy halls. Yet even in these early depictions, there are subtle clues that Gunther is not like the other penguins. His behavior stands out, his interests are more sinister, and his responses to events around him often hint at a hidden intelligence that goes far beyond what one would expect from a simple animal. It is through Ice King's bizarre relationship with Gunther that the first layer of the Gunther identity emerges. Ice King treats Gunther with a mix of affection, frustration, and dependency. He yells at Gunther, leans on him, and at times almost speaks to him as though he were his equal. The comedy of these interactions hides the truth, but in retrospect, it is striking how central Gunther is to Ice King's life. Unlike any other creature, Gunther endures Ice King's rants, absorbs his loneliness, and remains by his side. It is almost as if something greater was compelling Gunther to stay in this role, waiting quietly for the right time. The rise of the Gunther identity truly begins when we learn about Orgalorg. This ancient entity, once a cosmic terror, was cast down and forced into the form of a penguin as punishment. That penguin, as we come to understand, is Gunther. This revelation shifts everything. Gunther is not just a silly sidekick. He is a broken fragment of a once powerful being, living in the disguise of something small and unassuming. The rise of Gunther as a true character begins when his cosmic past starts to surface, creating moments where his behavior feels strangely threatening or otherworldly. The more we look back, the more we can see this rise in quiet ways. Gunther has moments of ambition that seem out of place, like when he tries to seize the Ice King's crown, or when his actions show a kind of hunger for power that does not fit the behavior of any ordinary penguin. These small glimpses, though fleeting, are the cracks in the mask. They remind us that beneath the identity of Gunther lies the shadow of something vast and terrible, waiting to return. What makes the Gunther identity so compelling is the contrast between what he is on the surface and what he is beneath. On the outside, he is comic relief. On the inside, he is Orgalorg, the breaker of worlds. The rise of this identity is not a loud or sudden event. It is subtle, creeping, like a whisper that builds over time. In many ways, this makes it more unsettling. We realize that all along, the dangerous truth was hidden in plain sight, right in the middle of Ice King's bizarre little family. But as much as the rise of Gunther's identity is about rediscovery, it is also about conflict. Gunther is not just Orgalorg reborn. He is also something new, shaped by years of being Ice King's companion. This duality complicates his rise. He is a cosmic being in the body of a penguin, but he is also a creature who has lived a life defined by companionship, chaos, and comedy. This tension creates a fragile balance that cannot last forever. The fall of the Gunther identity begins when this balance starts to crack. The cosmic nature of Orgalorg pushes against the smaller, simpler life of Gunther. At times, Gunther's actions seem to betray a yearning to escape the limits of his form, to once again seize power on a scale worthy of his true self. This struggle plays out in moments where Gunther attempts to wield the Ice Crown, a powerful artifact that resonates with his hunger for dominance. Each attempt shows us that the identity of Gunther cannot hold the enormity of Orgalorg without beginning to collapse. In many ways, the rise and fall of Gunther's identity is like watching two lives wrestle for control. The innocent penguin life wants stability, belonging, and companionship. The Orgalorg nature wants destruction, power, and dominion. The clash of these two selves ensures that Gunther's identity was never meant to last. Instead, it was always moving towards some kind of breaking point where the truth would fully emerge and the mask of the penguin would shatter. And yet, even in this looming collapse, there is something strangely human about Gunther's journey. He embodies the struggle of carrying two selves, of being forced into a role that hides a truth too heavy to bear. His rise shows us the resilience of identity, while his fall reminds us of how fragile and temporary masks can be. Gunther's rise in the Ice King story was both comedic and oddly tragic. To an outsider, it looked like a penguin squawking nonsense, waddling around with flippers and occasionally biting people with surprising ferocity. But inside the mythic framework of Adventure Time, Gunther was something far more layered. The mask of a silly penguin was covering a being who had once stood among the most powerful cosmic entities in all existence. Every time Gunther was scolded by Ice King for knocking something over, or when he was sent to fetch the crown like a servant, there was a strange echo underneath. It was as if this grand fallen entity had been reduced to nothing but a pet, caught in a loop of servitude. In many ways, Gunther's identity was a parody of itself. The mighty Orgalorg, who once swallowed worlds, was now trapped in the form of a tiny creature that struggled even to carry an empty bowl without stumbling. Yet the role of Gunther was more than humiliation. It was also survival. Because by being Gunther, Orgalorg could escape the notice of other entities. Reduced and hidden in the skin of a penguin, he became a background figure in the Ice King's icy kingdom. To the Candy Kingdom, to Finn and Jake, and even to most beings in Ooh, Gunther was harmless at best, annoying at worst. Nobody would suspect that within this waddling bird lived the remnants of a god of destruction. And this is where we see the rise of the Gunther identity. Over time, it wasn't simply an imposed mask. It became its own persona, shaped by the mundane habits of life around the Ice King. Gunther learned routines, attachments, and quirks. He discovered that knocking over bottles and glasses drew attention, and he seemed to thrive on that. He found mischief and perhaps even joy in being underestimated. This was Orgalorg's strength, twisted into something new. He was no longer feared, so he could act without suspicion. But with every rise comes the eventual fall. The Gunther identity was unstable because it was never meant to last. It was a compromise between cosmic punishment and survival instinct. And as the series unfolds, we start to see cracks in the facade, the occasional bursts of strange intelligence, the unexplainable power surges. The way Gunther seemed to know more than he should, all of these moments reminded us that this was not just a penguin. Perhaps the most striking symbol of this rise and fall is seen the way Gunther mimics the Ice King. Time and time again, Gunther is shown wearing the crown, copying Simon's mannerisms, even sitting on the throne like a ruler. It's played as a joke, but beneath the laughter lies something profound. Gunther, once Orgalorg, once feared by the stars, had been stripped of grandeur and now reflected his master's madness. It was as if Orgalorg had been reduced twice over, first from cosmic terror to penguin, and then from penguin to a parody of the Ice King. This doubling down of loss is where the fall becomes complete. Gunther is no longer Orgalorg in any visible sense, nor is he a fully independent creature. He is trapped in mimicry, repeating gestures of another fallen figure. The once great entity has become the shadow of a shadow, and that is what makes his story so tragically powerful. But there is also something hauntingly resilient about Gunther's rise and fall. Despite being reduced to a joke, he never truly disappears. Orgalorg's essence waits. In rare moments it surfaces, reminding us that the fall is never absolute. The core of who he was cannot be erased, only hidden beneath layers of identity. And that, in a way, makes the Gunther persona both a prison and a shield. Through this lens, the rise and fall of Gunther's identity becomes less about comedy and more about survival after devastation. To fall so far, and yet to remain, is its own form of power. Gunther's peculiar relationship with Simon became a central part of his identity. Though the penguin was mischievous and prone to causing chaos, there was an undeniable loyalty at the heart of their connection. Simon, even in his Ice King persona, seemed to understand Gunther in a way no one else did. Perhaps it was because Simon could sense, deep in his fractured psyche, that Gunther was more than just a bird. Perhaps some instinct whispered to him that this little creature shared a cosmic thread with him, both cursed and shaped by forces beyond mortal understanding. Still, Gunther's life in the Ice Kingdom was not without ambition. While most penguins happily waddled through their days content with fish and snow, Gunther displayed a yearning for more. He tried on Simon's crown when no one was looking. He strutted across the icy throne as though he were king himself. Sometimes he even summoned dangerous powers mimicking his master. These moments often ended in slapstick disaster, but they also revealed a hidden truth. Gunther wanted to be something greater. This ambition might seem comedic on the surface, but underneath, it was profoundly tragic. Gunther's true self, the ancient, terrifying being who had once challenged cosmic authority, was buried beneath layers of transformation. The small flickers of hunger for power were fragments of that identity trying to claw their way out. The penguin body was a cage, but one with cracks in its bars. Every reckless act of ambition was a reminder that Orgalorg still stirred inside. Over time, this longing manifested in increasingly bold attempts at transformation. The Ice King's magic crown became the ultimate temptation. Its cold jewels pulsed with ancient power, a power that Gunther could feel resonating with his own forgotten might. On more than one occasion, Gunther tried to seize it. He would place it on his head, trembling with excitement, only for the Ice King to snatch it back, or for the magic to overwhelm him in unexpected ways. In one such attempt, Gunther's hidden identity was briefly revealed. The crown amplified the essence of Orgalorg inside him, causing the small penguin body to warp and stretch into something monstrous. Tentacles writhed, eyes glowed with unnatural fury, and the being that had once terrified galaxies re-emerged, if only for moments. This was not the playful penguin the people of Ulu knew, but a glimpse of the conqueror who had been banished long ago. The Ice King, however, was largely oblivious to the gravity of this revelation. To him it was just another oddity in his already strange life. The crown had strange effects on everyone, he reasoned, so perhaps Gunther's transformations were just another quirk. Yet viewers and lore-seekers know better. This was the cosmos reminding us that identities, no matter how deeply buried, have a way of resurfacing. Gunther's moments of transformation highlight one of the most fascinating themes in Adventure Time, the fragility of identity. What does it mean to be Gunther if, at the core, one is still Orgalorg? Is the penguin persona merely a mask, or has it become its own true self through centuries of living? The series plays with this duality, showing us that even when identities are fractured, both sides can coexist in tension. Gunther was both the loyal companion of the Ice King and the lurking shadow of an ancient conqueror. The rise of Gunther's identity is best understood as a struggle between these two selves. On the surface, he was rising to become the most important figure in the Ice King's life, shaping the rhythm of the kingdom and often steering events through subtle actions. Yet beneath that surface, the fall was already in motion. Every ambitious grasp for the crown, every monstrous flicker of Orgalorg, brought Gunther closer to the breaking point. His true self could not be contained forever. What makes this rise and fall particularly haunting is how quietly it unfolded. Unlike great heroes or villains who meet their fate in epic battles, Gunther's saga was one of small moments, hidden ambition, and gradual unraveling. His tragedy was not sung by bards or carved into monuments. It played out in the lonely halls of the Ice Kingdom, witnessed only by snow, silence, and the fractured man who was his master. Gunther's fall began not with a dramatic clash, but with inevitability. The cosmos, after all, has a way of reclaiming what belongs to it. Orgalorg could not be suppressed forever. The penguin identity, no matter how strong, was destined to break under the weight of what lay beneath. And so the story of Gunther's rise is inseparable from the shadow of his fall. Every step upward was a step toward the collapse of the fragile mask he wore. By the time this collapse arrived, the world of UO was far different from the cosmos Orgalorg had once tried to conquer. Yet the hunger remained unchanged, waiting for its chance to break free. And when it did, the line between Gunther and Orgalorg blurred so completely that one could no longer tell where the penguin ended and the ancient terror began. As the years rolled by, the Gunther identity became more than just a disguise. It became a prison layered with irony. The mighty Orgalorg, once feared by worlds, now found himself mocked as a waddling penguin, tripping over ice and squawking nonsense. Yet beneath that disguise lingered an endless awareness. Orgalorg was trapped, but he was not erased. He remembered the battles he had lost, the cosmic power that had slipped away, and the banishment that had rewritten his existence. That awareness fueled him with both rage and patience, for he knew that time was vast and opportunities always emerged, even for the most forgotten beings. In this state, the Gunther identity grew increasingly complex. On the surface, he appeared loyal to the Ice King, one of countless penguins serving his master with erratic devotion. But even that role blurred the lines. Was Gunther truly devoted to Simon Petrikov's ice-cursed form, or was Orgalorg simply playing along while awaiting the right moment? At times, it seemed genuine affection had slipped into the act. Gunther fetched slippers, carried trays of food, and squawked comfortingly when Ice King mourned his loneliness. These small gestures gave viewers reason to wonder. Had Orgalorg, buried deep beneath feathers and instinct, begun to actually feel the pull of companionship? Or was it simply an echo of manipulation, a strategy to stay close to a figure who unknowingly provided shelter? The rise of the Gunther identity was, in its own strange way, a success. Orgalorg had managed to carve out a stable existence. He was no longer hunted by the cosmic court, no longer bound to the vastness of destruction, and no longer feared as a devourer of worlds. Instead, he blended into the daily comedy of Ooh, indistinguishable from the other penguins surrounding the Ice King. This anonymity gave him safety. No one would ever suspect that the silly bird at Ice King's side was once a cosmic entity of terrible power. In a way, the rise of Gunther as an identity proved that even the most destructive beings could hide in plain sight if given the right mask. But every mask eventually cracks. And so came the fall of Gunther. Not a fall in the literal sense, but a collapse of identity that revealed just how unstable the disguise truly was. Throughout the series, small flashes reminded us of Orgalorg's lingering presence. His sudden bursts of intelligence, his strange fascination with cosmic events, and even his manipulative tendencies all hinted at the truth buried beneath the penguin exterior. These cracks widened until, in moments of cosmic alignment, Orgalorg resurfaced. The transformation was jarring, a reminder that Gunther was never the true self, merely a shell covering something much darker. The fall of Gunther's identity was not just about Orgalorg breaking free. It was also about the Ice King's decline. Simon Petrikov's fractured mind gave Orgalorg endless opportunities to manipulate, positioning himself closer to the crown, closer to the icy magic that could amplify his return to power. When Gunther finally seized the crown, even briefly, the transformation into Ice Thing showed the culmination of this identity's collapse. No longer could the silly penguin disguise contain the truth. The ancient hunger roared back to the surface, and the world once again saw what lay beneath the feathers. This fall, however, was incomplete. Just as Orgalorg's return surged, the forces of Ooh pushed back. Gunther's identity was shattered, but not fully discarded. In many ways, it reassembled itself after each collapse, like broken glass glued together time and time again. The duality remained Gunther the penguin and Orgalorg the destroyer, two sides of a fractured existence struggling for dominance. This cycle of rise and fall became the very essence of the character. To call him only Orgalorg would dismiss the bonds and quirks of the Gunther disguise. To call him only Gunther would erase the shadow of cosmic destruction that lingered. And so, in the end, the rise and fall of Gunther's identity became an allegory for survival. It showed that even the most powerful beings could be reduced, reshaped, and redefined by forces beyond their control. But it also revealed the stubborn persistence of identity, that no matter how deeply buried, the true self always waits for its chance to resurface. Gunther's story reminds us that the masks we wear are never permanent. They may shield us, protect us, or even offer comfort, but they also crack under pressure. What lies beneath is never gone, merely waiting. As we drift from this chapter, let us carry the image of that small penguin waddling across the icy halls of the Ice King's palace. His squawks may sound silly, his steps may seem clumsy, but behind his beady eyes lingers the memory of galaxies shattered and destinies rewritten. The rise and fall of Gunther is both comedy and tragedy, a reminder that every being contains layers too deep to fully grasp. Some layers protect us, others haunt us, and some, like Orgalorg's shadow beneath Gunther's feathers, will never truly fade away. When we think of cosmic forces in Adventure Time, our minds often jump to beings like Prismo, the cosmic owl, or even Golb. These entities represent ideas larger than life concepts like destiny, chaos, and creation. But Orgalorg is different. His presence in the grand design of the universe feels like a reminder that not all cosmic beings are benevolent guardians or abstract dream shapers. Some exist only to consume, to dismantle, and to unmake. To truly understand where Orgalorg fits within the cosmic order, we need to step back and look at how Adventure Time often portrays the balance of power in its universe. At the highest level, the show suggests that creation and destruction are in constant tension. On one side are figures like Prismo, who offers mortals the chance to dream and shape alternate possibilities, and the Cosmic Owl, whose prophetic visions quietly guide the threads of fate. These entities may not be strictly good, but they preserve the flow of existence. On the opposite side lies Golb, the silent embodiment of chaos and disorder, a presence that seeks to undo structure and meaning. Somewhere between these poles exists Orgalorg, a being who doesn't create worlds or collapse them into primal chaos, but who instead thrives on consuming power and bending it toward his own hunger. If Golb represents the unraveling of reality itself, then Orgalorg is a parasite feeding on the stars that make up that reality. His appetite for cosmic energy makes him dangerous not just because of raw strength, but because he threatens the very resources upon which other cosmic forces depend. Stars, after all, are the lifeblood of existence. Without them, no worlds can sustain life, no dreamscapes can find anchor, and no multiverse can maintain balance. Orgalorg's hunger, in this sense, feels like an interruption of the natural order, a disruption that the other cosmic beings would not and perhaps could not ignore. This is why the story of Orgalorg's banishment to Earth becomes more than just an anecdote about a rogue villain being cast down. It represents the larger universe stepping in to maintain equilibrium. The other cosmic entities, whether directly or through unseen intermediaries, cast him away not because he was unbeatable, but because he was intolerable in the balance of things. His destruction of stars threatened the whole tapestry, and so he was diminished, transformed, and forgotten, becoming something small enough that the cosmos no longer had to fear him. Yet what makes this transformation truly fascinating is the idea that Orgalorg never lost his essence. The penguin named Gunther was still the vessel of that ancient entity. And here we find one of Adventure Time's most intriguing cosmic questions. Does identity matter in the grand scheme or only function? Orgalorg, as Gunther, was no longer consuming stars or unmaking balance. He was merely waddling around, fetching things for the Ice King and occasionally smashing bottles. But within him, the same cosmic hunger still lingered, waiting for a moment to awaken. This suggests that in the cosmic order, exile doesn't erase potential. It only buries it until the right spark brings it back. Orgalorg's placement alongside entities like Golb and Prismo also highlights how Adventure Time resists a simple hierarchy of good and evil. Instead, it paints a picture of a multiverse where every being, no matter how massive or small, has a role to play. Prismo creates possibilities. The Cosmic Owl reminds mortals of destiny, and Golb brings corruption and endings. Orgalorg's role, while darker, is still essential. He represents the danger of unchecked appetite, the reminder that even cosmic forces can act out of selfish hunger rather than cosmic duty. He is the cautionary tale that balance requires not just creation and destruction, but also the restraint of those who might tip the scales through greed. And perhaps that is why Orgalorg was reduced to Gunther rather than destroyed completely. To erase him might have destabilized the balance in another way, for even his hunger plays a role in defining what the cosmos must resist. Instead, he was reshaped, forced to live out his existence in miniature, and placed where he could no longer threaten the stars. In this way, Orgalorg's place in the cosmic order is both humbling and tragic. He is both a reminder of the vastness of the universe and a lesson about the boundaries that even cosmic beings cannot cross. The strange thing about Orgalorg's place among cosmic entities is that he seems both grand and small at the same time. He is a destroyer of worlds, a being feared by entire galaxies, yet in the state we first meet him in, he is just a waddling penguin with a love for sandwiches and loud honks. This duality raises a fascinating question. Was Orgalorg ever truly destined to be a key player in the cosmic hierarchy, or did fate simply make him into one? When we compare Orgalorg to other cosmic beings, he falls into an odd middle ground. Golb represents the unknowable force of pure chaos, the source of destruction and transformation beyond comprehension. The cosmic owl is a dream bringer tied to destiny and fate. Prismo is the wishmaster, a dimension-shaping presence who bends time and reality for those who enter his chamber. Orgalorg, by contrast, is not an architect of the universe, but a weapon within it. He doesn't create or guide destiny, he consumes and annihilates. His power is not about subtle influence, but about overwhelming force. Yet despite this, Orgalorg still fits into the grand design. The universe of Adventure Time shows us a balance where every force, whether chaotic, creative, or destructive, has its place. Orgalorg is the raw muscle of entropy, the brute strength of destruction that complements the delicate influence of entities like the cosmic owl or the trickster nature of Prismo. In other words, he is not an outlier, but a piece of the puzzle, representing a natural cosmic need for collapse, a reminder that creation cannot exist without destruction. What makes Orgalorg so fascinating, however, is that he does not entirely accept this role. When he regains fragments of his memory and understands again that he was once the great Orgalorg, he doesn't simply embrace it. Instead, he struggles between the mindless identity of Gunther and the terrifying purpose of Orgalorg. This internal conflict suggests that even a cosmic entity can resist its place in the order of things, that destiny may not be as fixed as the stars themselves. Another layer worth exploring is how Orgalorg interacts with Golb. In the lore of Adventure Time, many cosmic beings seem to operate in isolation, their roles rarely overlapping. But Orgalorg, in his ambition to consume power and take control of reality, is often seen encroaching upon realms tied to Golb's nature. While Golb is chaos incarnate, reshaping matter and mind into grotesque forms, Orgalorg is drawn to Golb's energy almost instinctively, as though his destiny is tethered to it. This creates a dynamic where Orgalorg is not just another powerful entity, but also a potential rival to Golb's dominance in the destruction of worlds. It may even explain why he was cast down from his cosmic throne to live as a penguin in Oo. Perhaps the other entities, or the very fabric of the universe, saw him as too dangerous, too willing to upset the delicate balance of power. His exile can then be read not as punishment alone, but as a cosmic necessity, keeping the universe safe from a being whose hunger for destruction was unchecked. Interestingly, this hunger is often shown in comedic ways when Orgalorg lives as Gunther. His constant desire for absolute power, his obsession with Ice King's crown, and even his destructive tantrums are not just quirks of a penguin, but hints of his true essence. These moments of absurdity hide a deep truth. Orgalorg, no matter what form he takes, will always be reaching for more, will always be driven by a need to reclaim a throne in the cosmic order. It is here that Orgalorg becomes symbolic. Unlike Prismo, who embraces his duties, or the cosmic owl, who quietly fulfills his role, Orgalorg refuses to accept the order assigned to him. He rebels against the balance, not out of righteousness, but out of greed. This rebellion, though destructive, makes him relatable. It mirrors the human tendency to reject limits, to seek more than what is given, to rage against the roles fate assigns us. Orgalorg, in this way, is not just a monster of the stars, but also a mirror of ambition, hunger, and resistance. And when we think about it, perhaps that is why he fits so well into the cosmic order despite his resistance. For if the universe is truly a tapestry of forces, then even rebellion must have its place. Orgalorg embodies this rebellion, the push against balance, the voice that says, "I will not be contained." His very defiance ensures that the order is tested, and in testing it, the universe proves its strength. And so we return once more to that tension between Orgalorg's intended role and the actual life it came to live. If we strip away the penguin disguise, the Ice King's palace antics, and the humorous waddling, what do we see? We see a cosmic entity meant to bring endings, a being whose hunger was designed for the swallowing of stars, not fish, a creature that should have been an eternal terror, feared by gods and kings alike. Yet destiny had other plans. Orgalorg became Gunther, and Gunther became a reflection of the small, ordinary, yet strangely enduring side of existence. Still, the presence of Orgalorg was never fully erased. The fact that it awakened during the comet's arrival proves that the identity was always lingering under the surface. The cosmic order could not quite erase Orgalorg from the cycle, no matter how far it was pushed down into obscurity. In this sense, Orgalorg demonstrates one of Adventure Time's most powerful recurring themes, that no role, no matter how monumental, is ever truly permanent. Just as Simon was never meant to be the Ice King forever, Orgalorg was never meant to live only as a penguin. The cosmic order constantly rewrites itself, and identities shift like sand beneath the tide. When we consider Orgalorg within the wider pantheon of cosmic beings, it becomes clear that it exists in a strange, liminal place. It is not entirely like Prismo, whose role is clearly defined by the time room and the limits of his power, nor is it fully like Golb, who operates as the pure embodiment of destruction and entropy. Instead, Orgalorg is almost a bridge between the two extremes, more limited than Golb, but far less structured than Prismo. It is chaos, but chaos with intent. Hunger given shape, yet hunger that must obey cycles of dormancy and reawakening. This halfway nature may explain why the other deities sought to cast it down. Perhaps Orgalorg represented an instability within the balance, a threat that was less about sheer power and more about unpredictability. And yet, what if this unpredictability was also its purpose? The universe of Adventure Time is not neat or orderly, even at its highest levels. Prismo may be bound by rules, but loopholes exist. The time room is meant to preserve order, but timelines fracture regardless. Even Golb, for all its horror, can be shaped by music, showing that chaos itself is not unbreakable. Orgalorg's place may have been to remind the cosmos that certainty does not exist, that no matter how carefully one tries to construct rules, there will always be something lurking at the edges, waiting to devour. This idea grows even more intriguing when we compare Orgalorg to the elemental forces of fire, ice, slime, candy. These primordial currents shape the mortal world and define civilizations. But Orgalorg is not tied to any such element. Its hunger is not fire, not ice, not candy. It is deeper, more fundamental, the hunger for existence itself. And if the elements are the building blocks of Oo's world, then perhaps Orgalorg is something like the shadow underneath them, a reminder that creation always has a cost, and that everything built must one day be consumed. Some might ask why Orgalorg failed in its attempts to reclaim this role. If it was truly meant to swallow stars, why did it never succeed? The answer lies in the fragility of timing. The comet arrived, but heroes stood in the way. Gunther's form both weakened and distracted the being's essence. And perhaps most importantly, the universe itself seemed unwilling to grant Orgalorg that victory. In this sense, Orgalorg was a test, an expression of hunger that could have become apocalypse, but instead was transformed into something smaller, stranger, and oddly endearing. It is here that we can see Orgalorg's connection to the other great cosmic forces once more. Golb may be inevitable entropy, but Orgalorg is failed entropy. It is the near miss of destruction, the apocalypse that almost was. And in that failure, it becomes a kind of balancing force. If Golb exists to guarantee that nothing lasts forever, then Orgalorg exists to show that destruction itself is not guaranteed either. In this way, Orgalorg's downfall becomes just as important to the cosmic order as its potential rise. And this reframing brings us to perhaps the most fascinating way to think about Orgalorg, not as a villain, but as a symbol. A symbol of hunger without satisfaction, of power without triumph. A reminder that even cosmic forces are subject to the shifting currents of destiny. And in this symbolic role, Orgalorg contributes to the harmony of the universe in a way that no star swallowing ever could. So what does this mean for the penguin we know as Gunther? It means that the creature's waddling, fish-stealing, and mischief-making were not distractions from its true identity. They were the true identity. Orgalorg's place in the cosmic order was not to consume galaxies, but to demonstrate, in its downfall, that the cosmos is not a place of certainties. That unpredictability and failure are just as integral to existence as power and success. And perhaps in the end that is why Orgalorg endured longer than most of its counterparts. It may not have devoured the stars, but it lived on through countless cycles, finding a strange immortality in smallness. A penguin at the foot of a broken king, surviving through eras when gods and empires fell. That too is a kind of cosmic significance. As we drift toward the final layers of this story, let us return to the quiet idea that Orgalorg is not just a villain or a creature of destruction. Instead, he may represent a cycle. In the Adventure Time universe, cycles define almost everything. Kingdoms rise, kingdoms fall, magic is discovered, then hidden, then rediscovered again. Characters gain power, lose it, and sometimes regain it in surprising forms. Orgalorg, too, is part of this eternal rhythm, a reminder that even the mightiest of beings cannot hold power forever. Think of how the show often treats destruction. Fire, floods, crumbling cities. These images appear again and again, but they are never presented as permanent endings. Instead, they clear space for something new. The Mushroom War destroyed the earth, yet from its ashes came the land of Oo, with all its strangeness and magic. Similarly, Orgalorg's attempts to consume power to assert dominance over the cosmos are always followed by his collapse into something smaller, something humbler. From galactic conqueror to penguin, from predator to companion, his transformations tell us that even in loss, life finds a way to reshape itself. And maybe that is why his story feels so haunting. It is not about whether Orgalorg succeeds or fails in his plans. It is about what those plans reveal about the universe. Every time he reaches for the stars, he reminds us that ambition without harmony leads to ruin. Every time he falls, he reminds us that even ruin can become the seed of a new identity. And every time we see him as Gunther, waddling and honking, we are reminded that power is only one face of existence. Another face is simply living, even in small ways. When we widen the lens to the other cosmic forces in Adventure Time, Orgalorg fits into a much bigger tapestry. If Golb is chaos without meaning, and Prismo is the dreamer who shapes time with imagination, then Orgalorg is the shadow between them, destruction that both clears and threatens. His place in the cosmic order is not to create or to nurture, but to test. He is the trial, the storm before renewal. Without him, perhaps the cycle would lose its sharp edge. With him, characters like Finn and Jake, like Ice King and even Magic Man, are pushed to confront the limits of their strength and the depth of their choices. There is also a gentle irony in how his role is concealed. To most of the land of Oo, Orgalorg is invisible, forgotten in legend, hidden behind the harmless face of a penguin. Only when the stars align does his true nature emerge, a reminder that beneath every quiet surface there may be an ancient truth. And yet most of the time, he is simply Gunther loyal, silly, clumsy Gunther. Perhaps this is the universe's way of showing mercy. Even cosmic forces of destruction are given moments of peace, moments of laughter, moments of companionship. As we let this thought settle, imagine Orgalorg drifting through the starry void, his massive form coiled like a shadow against the galaxies. Imagine him watching, waiting, not with hatred, but with patience. He knows the cycles will turn. He knows that destruction has its time, just as creation does. And for now, he rests, hidden in the unassuming body of a penguin, close to the crackling warmth of Ice King's fireplace. The cosmic conqueror and the silly bird are one, and that paradox is what makes him such a fascinating figure in the story of Adventure Time. And so, as we reach the end of this journey, we leave Orgalorg not as a monster or a forgotten god, but as part of the grand design. He is a shadow among many, a piece of the puzzle that makes the land of Oo feel so endless, so alive. His story whispers to us that even the darkest forces belong to the flow of existence, and that no shadow, no matter how deep, can erase the light that follows. With that thought, let us close our eyes and rest. May the stars above remind us of the vast mysteries still waiting to be discovered, and may the gentle hum of stories guide us into peaceful dreams. Good night.